So it was a last-minute decision, but my afternoon had suddenly opened up, and so I joined my parents to make a Shiva call for a close family friend of ours who had lost his mother. And so I drove to the valley, and I was there for maybe a couple of hours. And as I was walking back to my car, I realized that I hadn't had any phone service up in the Encino Hills. And so my phone was buzzing with notifications. So as I started driving home, a friend called me who I hadn't talked to in a few weeks. So I was excited to say hello, and I picked up the phone. And I said, "What's up, Avi?" He said, "Aaron, are you okay?" I said, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, I'm good." He goes, "I heard you were missing." I say, "Missing?" At this point, we're also both laughing. He goes, "Yeah, missing. 2 different people called me to see if I knew where you were, so I just called you directly, and you picked up immediately, so it seems like you're fine." I said, "Yeah, I'm good, but I guess I should probably call Zazu, my wife. But thanks for finding me." So if you haven't already gathered what took me a few too many minutes to figure out that day, I had forgot to tell my wife where I was heading that afternoon. And then I also hadn't clocked that I wasn't receiving texts or calls until I left Encino. So what had only been a 3-hour absence had caused a bit of a scare. And on one hand, I found the whole thing a bit silly. But I also understood how unnerving it was all of a sudden to be absent, even for a short while, to be missing. So after assuring Zazu I was okay, I responded to several texts that were only now continuing to come through, thanking my friends for their concern, apologizing for the scare, and I have since made a concerted effort to tell my partner whenever I decide to make an impromptu Shiva call. So at first glance, in this week's Parsha, Tetzaveh, nothing seems out of the ordinary. We read, Ve'ata tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, and you shall command the people of Israel. And this begins a long series of directions that God is delivering to Moses. However, as we progress through the Parsha, it becomes even more notable that the formula that opens up a series of commands, and God spoke to Moses saying, never shows up. We never read that phrase. In fact, the medieval Spanish commentator, the Baal HaTurim, makes a fairly jarring observation that throughout this entire Parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, will not be mentioned a single time. And I'll share, over the years, I never noticed this omission, but as I sat with it this week, I understood how it was a bit unsettling. The Israelites are still at the very beginning of their journey. We're still in the first half of our yearly Torah reading cycle, and we're already experiencing a void in leadership, in reassurance, at a minimum, in the presence of Moses. And in his commentary, the Baal HaTurim expands on this absence. He explains that Moshe's absence was actually a product of his own doing. Because in next week's Parsha, Ki Tisa, after the people have created the golden calf, this idol that they're worshiping, God will get so upset that God will threaten to destroy all of the people, all of the Israelites. Moshe is very defensive of his people, and he offers an ultimatum to God. He says, if you forgive their sin, all will be well and good. But if you don't, erase me from the record which you have written. So God will ultimately forgive the people, and so Moshe's ultimatum becomes moot. So why does the divine still decide in some way to honor Moshe's request to at least in part remove him from the record of the Torah? Rabbi Tali Adler explores this question, and she writes that the sin of the golden calf, the sin in the wake of which Moshe will issue his ultimatum, is born from the people's inability to cope with Moshe's absence after 40 days away convening with God. Panicked, they immediately assume that Moshe's absence means that they have been abandoned and look for a replacement. And so in giving us a parsha without Moses' name, the Torah allows us to enter into our ancestors' experience. We read this parsha and notice that Moshe is missing, just as the people experienced that Moshe was missing. And while I don't believe that this parsha is hoping to induce panic, there is something profound about an opportunity to empathize with the Israelites' experience of fear around loss or around the void of leadership they're experiencing. And as a result, it gives us the opportunity to reflect on what parts of this experience are universal, and also how do we have an opportunity to react differently. How can absence foster not panic, but a response that is met with greater resolve, with greater clarity about how to respond meaningfully, how to respond thoughtfully, productively when we're confronted with such an absence? So I've been thinking about this question constantly. How do we confront absence? So on Tuesday night, the president delivered the State of the Union address to a joint session of Congress. And much of the discourse over the last few days has been that it felt like there wasn't and hasn't been any unified communication or strategy or presence in how to respond to this administration's tirade against not only our norms and institutions, but also our fundamental rights to safety and to community and to our well-being. And so I continue to feel myself and read and hear from so many folks that it feels right now what we're feeling is a real void in leadership, in messaging, in strategy, and how to respond to this moment where there is so much heaviness, there are such real stakes. And for all of us in this room, it's not the only absence we're feeling, right? As Angelinos, we are still very much reeling from the immense loss from the fires, the Eaton fires and the Palisades fire and the fires across the greater Los Angeles area. And so many of these losses, not unlike Moshe's absence, they're not necessarily absolute, right? They fall into this category that we describe as ambiguous loss, which, by the way, is not necessarily any less painful or any less real, but it is harder sometimes to define, especially when those around us seem to not be experiencing the same acuity of this reality, of this loss. And so in moments where Torah can reflect back to us our own experience, when it seems like there's a deep wisdom our tradition is holding, the question we have to ask then is, so what now? Right? We see this mirror, so what do we do with it? How do we learn from the Israelites? How do we witness and we validate and we honor their fear while understanding that the Torah is offering us a window, right? An opportunity to meet this absence, our own absences, our own voids, from a more grounded place. So this opening verse that I shared that omits Moses' name, it's also notable because it's the verse that for the first time we are introduced to the Ner Tamid, the eternal light that we sometimes see in congregations that will be above an ark. In this case, it was the eternal light that would be lit in the Mishkan, at the tabernacle, the place that God's presence would reside. And I learned from a mentor of mine that in this week's Parsha of Tetzaveh, we'll read this word Tamid, the second word of Ner Tamid, which means, Tamid itself means everlasting or uninterrupted continuity. We'll read this word 6 times in this Parsha, which is more than any other Torah portion throughout our yearly cycle. So I want to slow down and emphasize this point, because to me it feels profound. In a Parsha where we're confronted with an absence, we're also instructed on the importance of that which can remain constant, that which can be everlasting. These ideas, which I know in some ways can feel contradictory, feel like they must be understood in relationship to one another. How can we possibly and perhaps confront the void by accessing that which is constant, that which is always present. And so there's a great Talmudic debate that the rabbis of the Talmud have. They ask one another, what is the greatest verse in all of Torah? What is the most important principle? So Rabbi Akiva jumps in and he argues, he says, the verse is, love your neighbor as yourself. But then Ben Azai jumps in and he says, no. It's the verse from Breshit that says, and God created human beings in the divine image. And then Shimon ben Pazai shares a verse from this week's Parsha. One sheep shall be offered in the morning and a second in the afternoon. As most Talmudic discussions often do, a final verdict is made. Another rabbi jumps in, Rabbi Ben Ploni. He stood up and said, the greatest principle in the Torah lies with that final opinion, with Rabbi Shimon ben Pazai. Yeah, let that sink in. It's not the golden rule that we should treat folks the way that we want to be treated. And it's not the idea that we all contain within us a divine spark, but it's instead a verse that describes the regular practice of bringing offerings to the divine. So what's going on here? So the Netivot Shalom is a 20th century Musar text, and it explains this conclusion. The explanation of Ben Pazai is a more inclusive answer than the other verses because it emphasizes that a person should do service or serve God with constancy, tamid. Therefore, the verse referring to the tamid sacrifice in the morning and in the afternoon every day is the basis of the Torah. Everything else is simply commentary. So if the Baal HaTurim is teaching us that being presented with this void is an opportunity to react with intention, then what the Netivot Shalom is doing is offering us this idea that if we lean on that which is constant, that which is everlasting, that which we do have at our disposal, our community, our faith, our resolve, this is the solution. Instead of panic or overreaction or despair, we can instead lean into what we already know, what we always have access to, this very act of holy and consistent regular service. And to be clear, what our tamid is, that which is constant or ever present, it will look a little bit different for each of us. It might be making a renewed commitment to political organizing or to finding a political home. It might be continuing a conversation with a loved one, maybe even someone who has passed away. It could be finding more time to pray or to learn or to do what we call in our tradition avodah, holy service. What our Torah is offering us is that absence need not be a cause of despair. Instead, it can and should be an opportunity to tap into the wellspring of what we have always had, of what we currently have, what will always be ours. So this Shabbat is the one that immediately precedes next week's holiday of Purim. And every year this Shabbat, the one that is a few days before this holiday, we call it Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat of remembrance. And the reason for this is that at the core of this Shabbat is this commandment to remember Amalek, who was an Israelite enemy. We're supposed to remember the way that Amalek tried to destroy our people. And we believe that the villain of next week's story of Purim, Haman, was a direct descendant of Amalek. And so each year, the Shabbat before Purim, we observe this commandment of remembering. Shabbat Zachor, we're here to remember tonight. And so as we enter Shabbat Zachor, I'm considering how memory itself can be the source of tamid, of continuity from which we can draw strength. This loss of what once was Whether it's this tectonic shift in our political landscape, or it's the gut-wrenching changes in what our city now looks and feels like, or any personal losses that we may be facing. These are voids that will not be filled in quickly. And in these moments where we may feel the severity of this absence, it is so easy to forget what we already know. But memory is ours. It's one of our greatest resources. We know how to show up. We know how to take care of one another. We know how to be of service because we've already done it. And so my blessing is that on this Shabbat Zachor, that we remember to continue to grow and to continue to build and to continue to organize and to continue to heal. And please, God, may it be that Moshe's absence is not a cause for panic, but it's an opportunity to remember everything that we are capable of when we step into that void and fill it with our own Ner Tamid, our own everlasting light. Shabbat Shalom.
Picture you in the sun, wondering what went wrong, and falling down on your knees, asking for sympathy, and being caught in between all you wish for and all you've seen, and trying to find anything you can feel that you can believe in. May God's love be with you always. May God's love be with you. I know I would apologize if I could see your eyes, 'cause when you showed me myself, you know, I became someone else. But I was caught in between all you wish for and all you need. I picture you fast asleep. A nightmare comes and you can't keep awake. May God's love be with you always. May God's love be with you. 'Cause if I find my own way, how much will I find? If I find my own way, how much will I find you? Will I find you? and I don't know anymore what it's for. I'm not even sure if there is anyone who is in the sun. Can you help me to understand? 'Cause I was caught in between all you wish for and all you see. Maybe you're not even sure what it's for any more than me. May God's love be with you.